And welcome back, everybody. We're talking to San Diego CEOs and business leaders. And today we've got another fantastic guest, CEO and co-founder of Wrapify, James Heller is here. Hey, James.
How's it going, Bob?
Fantastic. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Well, so many questions I want to get to about Wrapify. But first, I want to talk a little bit about you and how you got into the space, into the advertising, outdoor advertising space initially, and kind of your journey on how you got here.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, my background stems from being an entrepreneur when I was really, really young. Marketing has always been something I've been very passionate about. But I mean, the ethos of Wrapify started when I was looking for a service that did sort of what Wrapify does today, and it just didn't exist. And that kind of ate away at me enough to where I, quit a pretty cushy Fortune 50 job and decided to put everything into building this.
Okay, so you're growing up in San Diego, correct? And then you go to San Diego State and
Cal State San Marcos.
Yeah. Cal State San Marcos, sorry. And then you go into marketing in a big business initially, it sounds like.
Well, I actually started consulting through high school on the SEO and SEM side of things back when that was a very, very new thing. Internet marketing wasn't really it was very a niche thing when I started doing it. And then I started consulting and really focused on technology, basically B2B technology, because tech has always been a big part of my life as well. Starting with being a 10-year-old at the San Diego Mac Users Group, all the way through helping fix computers for my middle school and then just being being that guy. And then, became marketing director for a data center and cloud provider here in San Diego. And then that kind of led to cloud computing and being a marketer in the cloud computing space. And that's kind of what led to my tenure at Ingram Micro.
And so did you always think you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Is that something kind of goes way back?
Yeah. I mean, since I was probably 5 or 6.
Yeah. So this is kind of a dream for you then. I mean, you were set out to be a business owner, and that's what you're in the process of executing right now.
Exactly. I mean, I couldn't really ever see it any other way.
Yeah, but working for somebody else.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I think working for other people really helped shape me as an entrepreneur because I learned a lot of amazing management skills. And on the flip side, I learned of what not to do on the management side of things. Even the worst examples of some of the folks I reported to or companies I've worked for, and luckily I didn't really have a lot of these, but those are things that definitely shape you as a leader. And definitely just kind of learning what not to do is almost as important as learning what to do.
Yeah, I want to hit on that a little bit as well. As you're kind of becoming an entrepreneur and going through that process, what was some of the advice, or maybe even bad advice, that you received along the way there?
Well, I mean, when I say what not to do versus what to do, I think that there are examples for where I had management where I reported to managers and folks that ran their respective organizations that were amazing at their job and really kind of helped me learn some of the things that I really need to take with me as I grow and as I become a leader in the space. And then there have been examples where I've seen really poor management decisions and experience what it actually feels like to be on the other end of that. And that kind of helps the shaping empathy and making sure that like I don't do those things as a manager, as a business owner, as a startup founder. I mean, in terms of good advice versus bad advice, I think that some of that advice is time limited. Where the advice might be applicable for that period of time, but it doesn't apply to current date. I mean, a good example is like the way you raise capital today is different than the way you raise capital in like 2015. And there's always like different themes and different tools and different just methodologies and what's like normal. Like for example, in 2015, a Series A, like the size of a Series A for a startup, and the amount of traction you needed to raise that Series A is so different than today. The size of a Series A is an order of magnitude bigger than what it was in like 2015. The amount of traction you needed as a company, as a startup, was a lot different. The metrics that were tied to that were different. So I think, yeah, it really depends.
Yeah, sure. Well, and let's talk about Wrapify a little bit. In fact, why don't you set it up for us a little bit and give us a kind of maybe a 1 minute, 2 minute elevator pitch on Wrapify.
Sure. So Wrapify is the largest ad platform in the gig economy. And what that means is we provide brands with the ability to scale advertising on gig vehicles nationwide. And more importantly, provide them with the ability to measure what that exposure actually does for a brand. So, to distill it all the way down, we put ads on, rideshare vehicles. So folks that drive for Uber and Lyft, food and grocery delivery. So folks that drive for like DoorDash, Uber Eats, Instacart, those types of services. And on the driver's side, we're a bolt-on to what they're already doing on the road. So we're basically providing them with another source of income while they're out there doing those gig services. And then on the brand side, we're a multi-channel ad platform where we drive really, really high recall out of home with what we deploy on vehicles. And then we actually provide attribution and media measurement and the ability to retarget the audience exposed all in a dashboard online. So it's almost like this hybrid of out of home advertising and digital advertising all combined in this really unique platform. And that's what we've been spending the last 6 years building.
Well, I've seen how these cars are wrapped, which is really amazing. And I can see behind you some of the big brands that you're working with or have worked with. So does it work best, or let me put it this way. I assume that big brands kind of benefit the most from this type of advertising.
I mean, what's cool about Wrapify is it scales. You could be a local brand that wants to be able to really own your market. But if you look at the vast majority of the brands that leverage us, they're pretty much all blue chip Fortune 500 companies, or really well backed, venture backed startups. So I mean, and I think that's really more of a function of budget and what it costs to really deploy a meaningful Wrapify campaign. We don't have a ton of SMB and mom and pops on the platform, and that's really just a function of what it costs to actually put a meaningful campaign in the market. Now that being said, we've got national brand advertisers leveraging us in a national capacity and in 20 plus markets across the US, and we've got national brands that are leveraging us in specific locations across the country on more of a regional and like hyper local scale. So what's really cool about Wrapify is it scales. We're live nationwide. We have the ability to deploy campaigns anywhere in the US. And it gives us the ability to really work with a wide variety of verticals and company types.
And it changes a little bit, I've noticed as well, as far as sometimes you'll have, I don't know if they're called swarms, where you see a series of vehicles that are going through a certain situation, and maybe that's hitting a target event or something like that. But then you also, as you mentioned, you'll see wrapped cars just going through certain neighborhoods.
Yeah, I mean, we're a flighted media platform, and what that means is, the minimum duration's 4 weeks, typical durations between 8 and 12 weeks, which is kind of average for an out-of-home campaign. Out-of-home is the category of advertising that Wrapify sometimes gets bucketed into, even though we're a lot more than just out of home. And Swarm is a really cool feature that allows brands to actually get those vehicles to drive around specific locations at specific times throughout the duration of their campaign. So, good example here in town, we got the Padres on the platform. When they have a home game coming, or when they've got a really important event that's happening in San Diego, they'll direct those vehicles to drive on the road segments around that, that point of interest or that specific event. And so that's like a feature that you have access to when you have a campaign on the road.
And I know it's much more than just wrapping the cars, and it's measuring that attribution, or without getting too deep into the marketing weeds, which I can't go that far with you. How do the companies measure? How do you help them measure the feedback from the wrapped cars?
Yeah, so we actually have some patents on this. It's actually how we won several awards. And so at a very high level, we have a patent on measuring a moving outdoor advertisement. That's actually really what put us on the map in 2016. And we were the first to really create a data visualization for a moving outdoor advertisement in terms of the amount of impressions that it could garner. And then we took that a step further by adding a attribution layer, which means we can actually tell the brand what the exposed audience did compared to folks that were not exposed in the same market area during the campaign period, like while it's in flight. And why that's important is, most traditional or out of home mediums, if you're getting any measurement, it's like post campaign. You're finding out about it through a third party at the end of the campaign. And so you don't really know like how the things work, how the campaign's running, how it's working. And so that's really like what changes the game with Wrapify. It's akin to like a Google Ads or a Facebook Ads Manager, where you can log into a dashboard, see data visualization of where these vehicles are driving, how many impressions they're garnering, what attribution metrics we're actually measuring, whether it's homepage visitation, folks actually swiping a credit card on the website, visitation into a physical location like a retail store, or in like the Padres case, the stadium. They really care a lot about measuring footfall and butts in seats. So being able to actually show them the metrics helps provide efficacy for does this channel work? And that ultimately allows the brand to say, hey, this worked, let's continue to invest in this channel. And so we knew that we had to do that right off the bat, because out of home is a very difficult thing to measure, and giving brands that ability to have that data layer really, really changes the game.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm just going to put into perspective, thinking about a radio advertising campaign or a billboard campaign, kind of the old school stuff where you had to wait to the ratings to come out to see how many people you might have touched. This is like instant data that you're receiving.
Yeah, it's really cool, and I'm super proud of it.
Yeah, well, it sounds really cool, and the wrapped cars are really cool. And so, how did that evolution go? Because I remember seeing, you got billboards, and then you had some trucks that had some, big things on the side of them, and then you started seeing some of these wrapped cars. That's really changed over the past 5 years.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely one of the primary, or if not the leading catalyst for that. I mean, before Wrapify, wrapping vehicles was a novelty. It wasn't a scalable ad medium. It was what Joe the plumber did with their fleet of vans, and maybe the local mom and pop wrapped their company vehicle. And now it's a legitimate out of home platform that the largest brands on the planet use. So it's that was a heavy lift. And we were the ones that were leading the charge on that lift. I mean, when we first started Wrapify, the total venture invested in the space was probably sub 10 million, maybe sub 20 million, and now it's like well north of 300 million. So there's a lot to be said about being first to market and the challenges that come with building a category from the ground up, and then also defending your spot in that category. which is, becomes the new challenge, right? You create a category and then people go, okay, well, cool. If they could do it, let's see if we can do it too. And yeah, I mean, being able to build a competitive moat around your technology, around your sales process, the brand relationships you have, your supply channels, all the things that go into making it so that you actually can turn a profit and keep those brands happy. It's really, really challenging. It's not trivial.
Yeah. Are you seeing a lot of other people, companies trying to jump into the space now?
There's been quite a bit of competitive noise, I would call it right now. I wouldn't say that we have like real like de facto direct competitor, but there are definitely folks that are gaining traction on the coattails of Wrapify.
Yeah. Now, being a visible CEO in San Diego, I'm curious to get your take on this podcast and kind of just what I do for a living on the real estate side. I'm able to meet a lot of tech company CEOs, founders. Um, what are you seeing kind of just in that tech space in San Diego and the local ecosystem? To me, it seems like it's really on the upswing and just has a lot of positive momentum right now.
Oh yeah, I mean, when we first started, being a San Diego startup meant that you had the San Diego discount. It meant that like you weren't serious. You weren't in the Bay Area, so therefore you didn't matter. And that is just totally not true. I mean, we just saw today that Viore raised 400 million from SoftBank. Like an apparel company just raised 400 million dollars
Jeez.
from
Nuts.
the VC. Like not like a top 10, like the number one. I mean, we see the same thing with brands like ClickUp and Flock Freight, and I mean the amount of venture invested in. And what I'd like to highlight too is San Diego's always been very like biotech, life science focused, and there's still tons of growth, tons of venture capital, so much money being poured into that here. And if you weren't in that category, then yeah, you like suffered the San Diego discount, and that doesn't matter anymore. That is just not even a thing anymore. And I think part of that is, well, one, we've got some really amazing founders here that have really helped change that narrative, and two, the pandemic really changed the way people think about where they want to be. And as it turns out, San Diego is a pretty fucking cool place to be. So I think that that's one of the other challenges we have in as being a founder in San Diego now is one of the things we had in our cap was being able to retain talent and get talent for an order of magnitude less than it would cost for the same talent in the Bay Area, and that has really changed.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's great perspective as well, because I see that, but not as much as you're really in the space and can see it firsthand. So before I let you go, also I want to get your take kind of on that note on the we have all this great tech space, tech office space. These different campuses. Google's growing here, Apple. Where do you see things as we still battle through the pandemic? On the going back to work and or the hybrid model, and you're in the gig economy, and where do you see things over maybe the next 12 to 24 months?
I could definitely see. I mean, well, first off, like commercial real estate had a great 100 years. So the fact that you guys had like 1-2-ish years of a little bit of like nobody's going to cry over that.
Right.
But the hybrid model, I think, is very real. I think that companies are going to look for different types of space. The layout of that space, the use of that space, the amount of full-time employees that are working out of that space, that has fundamentally changed. But I also see a lot of value in having space. I mean, we kept our headquarters. We didn't shut down our headquarters because of the pandemic. That being said, we've always been a remote first company. Most of our sales, or most of our team, is distributed across the US. We've got a big chunk of that team here in San Diego. And yeah, so it's changed the way I think about it. I've always been a big fan of, I want my employees all under one roof, and I'd like to be able to, I like the collaboration that comes from being in person. But at the same time, we had our best year ever being almost fully remote. So kind of I mean, the numbers don't lie, and also team morale is way up. Productivity is way up. So I think there is something to be said about a hybrid model, and the way that we leverage commercial space, going into 2022.
Yeah, I agree. It's almost like you have to just change the way you think about it a little bit. It's kind of all about the tenant experience, and that's going to change depending on who you talk to.
Right.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, so I'll leave you here in a second, but last question will be, what's next for Wrapify? Where do you go from here in the next couple of years?
I mean, we're just so focused on, like, we're past that. Do we have product market fit? We now have unequivocal product market fit. Like, there's nothing in any of the metrics that we have that show that we don't yet. We have really amazing repeat client traction. Brands love leveraging Wrapify. They're coming back, and when they come back in a much bigger way the second, third, fourth, fifth time. So right now it's really just focus on scaling, and then also adding some new product lines on the software front. We launched a SaaS subscription model that allows brands that own and operate their own branded fleet to leverage the technology we built for media measurement and attribution and retargeting. So we're pretty focused on that right now. But again, like, it's really just, we need to scale what we built, and we're now at that stage. We're at that growth stage of the company now.
Awesome. James, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Continued success with the company and everything. And again, I just really appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us.
I appreciate it, Bob. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks, man. Thank you.
Thanks. See ya.